In this video, I'm going to be going over Strikers versus HeartBreaker, the pros and the cons. Welcome to Did You Know? First off, small disclaimer, there are going to be a lot of spreadsheets, simply just because I don't want to get into an argument of what I personally believe or what others personally believe is going to be better. They both have upsides, they both have downsides. The majority of this is mostly going to be focused on the DPS of the sets, which I'm hoping most of you would already know that Strikers is just going to be better, but how much better is it? Is the DPS increase that you'd fundamentally be getting worth it? And how far behind is HeartBreaker to actually make use of that armor? They are really going to be the main questions we are asking. Not going to go into my personal opinions of what I personally feel or believe or think is better. We are just going to be sticking to the cold, hard, unrelenting, reliable math. So, first of all, let's have a quick gander at their sets. For the two-piece, Strikers offers 15% weapon handling, where the HeartBreaker offers 15% AR and LMG damage. Now, it is worth noting that these are their weakest stats. However, the handling actually outperforms the AR or LMG damage, and the simple reason for this is these are both sets that require you to hit things in order to gain damage. Although only 15% handling, this is a marked increase which will allow you to hit things more consistently and accurately to build up stacks. Especially when considering with the percentages that HeartBreaker is dealing with, it literally only needs 5 stacks. It would be 4.2 stacks. 4% basically puts you even with 15% AR or LMG damage. 5 stacks completely outperforms it. So you only need 5 stacks to outperform 15% AR. The quicker and easier you're able to get to those stacks, the more damage you're actually doing. So despite people thinking that 15% AR or LMG damage is worth it, it's really kind of not. And the only thing you're really getting out of it is a waste of time. Handling, you could argue the exact same. It's not actually giving you damage. However, depending on how you play and depending on what weapon you're using, that 15% increase in handling can be beneficial depending on the weapon. For some weapons, such as FAMAS, Carbine 7 and a few others, it's really not worth it, and you're basically just adding into a stat that doesn't need it to be added into. However, from a mass perspective, handling will beat AR 15% AR damage pretty much every time. For their 3-piece bonuses, Strikers gets 15% fire rate, whereas HeartBreaker gets 15% weapon handling. This is a little bit more kind of awkward, simply just because we've just spoken about weapon handling and how powerful it potentially is on this type of set. HeartBreaker then goes and gets 15% weapon handling. The issue is Strikers here now has 15% fire rate, and due to the fact that these sets are basically king and queens of the DPS, they are pretty much unmatched. Fire rate is kind of a joke in this manner, and I don't mean a bad joke. It's kind of unfair for the simple fact that 15% fire rate in terms of DPS is a direct multiplier. If you did 10,000 DPS and you increased your fire rate by 10%, you will get a direct 10% multiplier effectively on top of your DPS. So just times your 10,000 DPS by 1.1, ta-da, there you go. Which now means that even if you did the same weapon, same build, same stats, everything, just because Strikers has that 15% increase in fire rate, Strikers is going to do 15% more DPS. Just for a bit of perspective, in order for the AR damage and the weapon handling to keep up with that 15% fire rate, HeartBreaker, the first set the 2-set bonus, the first one you get, would need to be 60% AR damage just to make up the difference. Not to take a head, just literally to get within the same percentile of strikers. For our 4-piece bonus, weapon hits increase total weapon damage by 0.65%, stacking up to 100 times. 2 stacks are lost each second for strikers. For HeartBreaker, it's very similar. Headshots apply a pulse. Weapon hits against a pulsed enemy adds 1 stack. 1 stack will give 1% bonus armor and 1% damage towards pulsed enemies to a max of 50 stacks. 2 stacks are lost each second. Now, although these read near enough identical when you actually come down to it, hit enemy, get 1% damage, or get an increase in damage, 0.65 or 1%. What this actually ultimately comes down to is 1, their max stacks, and 2, their application. For strikers, at max stack, it's 65% amplified damage. And all you have to do is hit the target. With HeartBreaker, you have to pulse the target first. Now, there are ways around this, such as using the Technician laser, but this does also remove an attachment for you. Or get the headshot, which now depends on player accuracy. And at base, just at this point, the maximum stack you're able to get is 50% amplified damage. So 1, strikers offers more of 65% amp, and 2, strikers is easier to actually get as well as maintain. Although most people would argue the differences in getting and maintaining is going to be a non-issue, just from base value at this point, all we have to do with strikers is hit the target, where with HeartBreaker, we have to hit the head. We're not worrying about the laser pointer at the moment. We have to hit the head to then get the pulse target. The pulse target only lasts for 5 seconds, which now means you've only got 5 seconds to try and get as many stacks as possible. In terms of application, strikers does more and is easier to get. Plus side for HeartBreaker at this point is 1 stack does equal 1%. So if you have 10 stacks, that's 10%. 50 stacks, 50%. Whereas with strikers, 1 stack is 0.65%. 2 stacks is 1.3%, and if we go for 10 stacks, well, we get 6.5%. So for percent, HeartBreaker will offer you more in terms of hit for hit. However, it won't be more in terms of DPS, simply due to that lovely little bit of fire rate that we were talking about earlier. Onto the chest talent. Striker's chest increases max stacks from 100 to 200. And this also means that in part we lose 3 stacks when we're between 101 and 200 stacks. Chest talent for HeartBreaker is it increases our max stacks to 100. Now this, in terms of strikers, is actually a double-edged sword. It does mean that we're able to near enough double our hit for hit output, taking us from 65% to 130%. It does also mean that we now need to maintain, well, first achieve and then maintain 200 stacks. 200 stacks for the majority of gameplay is going to be near impossible for you to get, let alone maintain in the first place. This is why a lot of people would argue the chest is categorically not worth it. However, as previously stated, with the RPM increase, 130% amp is going to be more than worthwhile. In comparison to HeartBreaker, having 100 stacks while not actually getting an increase in our decay rate as strikers does, when you're over 100 stacks you lose 3 per second rather than 2. We don't get this with HeartBreaker. We maintain our 2 stacks lost per second. However, it does mean that for the maximum output of strikers, it is only going to be 100. It's the highest you're able to get it, and despite the fact that this is nothing to scoff at, just looking at the striker's chest, we've gone from 65 versus 50 to 130 versus 100. Including the fire rate from the 3-piece talent from strikers, things are now looking quite dismal in terms of just outright DPS. The only plus side here is we've able to near enough double our armor with HeartBreaker, which theoretically does mean we're able to have higher DPS output, simply due to the fact that we're able to stay in the fight long enough. Last but not least is the backpacks. For strikers, it increases the total weapon damage gain per stack from 0.65 to 1%. And for the HeartBreaker backpack, stacks now supply a 2% bonus armor rather than 1%. What this in total really means is on HeartBreaker, we've now tripled our armor output. We go from utilizing the chest in conjunction with the backpack, we go from our standard base armor, which is 100. We then gain 100 stacks. Without the backpack, this is a 100% increase in armor, doubling our armor. With the HeartBreaker backpack, we then are able to gain triple our armor, so giving us a total of 200% increase in our armor. However, the Striker's backpack is more directly comparable to the HeartBreaker chest, as Striker's by itself is 0.65, HeartBreaker is 0.5 in total output, so that's 65% and 50% respectively. Adding in the HeartBreaker chest, that puts HeartBreaker's gains to 100%. Adding in the Striker's backpack, that also puts Strikers to 100%. The difference here is Strikers also has a damage output chest talent, whereas the Striker's backpack isn't for damage. So at this point, just comparing them two at 4 pieces with both chest and backpack, we have a 200% multiplicative gain with Strikers, but only a 100% multiplicative gain with HeartBreakers. Right, now I hope you're ready for some spreadsheets, because we're going to compare this, which is just 4-piece Strikers with improvised gear, against same thing essentially, but with HeartBreaker. What this allows us to do is test what a weapon will be doing with just base level stats. There's no crit chance, there's no crit damage, it's just base level stats. We are using a FAMAS, and we are assuming we have 100% all weapon damage, along with the AR being at maxed with 10% detox, because that's typically what you would have, along with the base level value of a SHD watch at 1000, so that's 45% critical hit damage, 10% crit chance, blah 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 blah, everything else. Hopefully from this you should be able to see that just its base weapon stats and talent stats from the gear sets, Strikers is doing a 21.23% more damage in terms of burst DPS. If we then add the chest talent into the mix, still keeping with just the base 4 pieces, as you can see here we've got the same with Strikers, HeartBreaker, sorry, so we're just going for the chest talent now. Strikers is going to do with the chest 26.74% more burst DPS. Again, I'm not including in crit chance or crit damage other than what is naturally available to you at SHD 1000. Now the same again, but this time we're just going to look at the backpack. So obviously Striker's backpack, improvised chest, HeartBreaker backpack, improvised chest. Now obviously this is quite unfair because the HeartBreaker backpack doesn't give an increase in damage where the Strikers does, so you end up with 46.94% increase in total DPS, in favour of course to Strikers. Now to make this a bit fairer, I did compare the Striker's backpack, as you can see here, against the HeartBreaker chest, as you can see here. However, even under this scenario, there is still a 10.21% difference between them in favour of Strikers. This is that pesky fire rate coming into effect. As you can hopefully see, Strikers has a 1035 RPM, where HeartBreaker has a 900 RPM. Now to compare both chest and backpack on both, so Striker's chest and backpack against HeartBreaker chest and backpack. This is going to go pretty much where most of you are probably thinking at this point. So the increase in damage is a 65.31 increase when compared directly to HeartBreaker in favour of Strikers. So there really is a very large difference between these two sets when it comes to just pure output. Even if we set both of these builds up for their maximum DPS potential possible, which are the two builds that I have just shown, there is still a staggering 22.74% difference between them. At minimum, a maximum of 25%, depending if you're hitting the body or the head. Even if we compare the builds that I've been running in this video, 4-piece HeartBreaker, Cheska backpack with vigilance, named Uzina chest for closer for perfect spotter, Kingbreaker for perfect flatline, 60% crit chance, 117% crit damage, a 50% multiplier from HeartBreaker, a 0.2 multiplier from spotter, 0.2 from flatline. Against what I've been running from the start of the video was a Strikers build with Honey Badger. We had a Coyote's Mask, Grupo chest with Obliterate, 4-piece Strikers. Honey Badger, I've actually left the talent out. It's future perfect, so I don't even have a damage talent. 50% crit chance, natively 136 critical hit damage, adding in Coyote's Mask, we're either at 146 or 157% critical hit damage. Yeah. Despite the HeartBreaker build being stacked so much more mathematically, having technically the higher DPS weapon as the TKB does outperform Honey Badger, it's just that pesky fire rate that gets in the way. The Strikers build and the HeartBreaker build that I was running in this video, mathematically speaking, the HeartBreaker build should be doing so much more, but that pesky fire rate still allows it to do 11 to 15% more DPS. So despite the fact that Kingbreaker, better AR technically, has a better damage talent on it, well, actually has a damage talent on it. We're also running a separate damage talent on our chest. Yeah, it was unable to keep up with a rather passively built Strikers build. So, in terms of pure DPS, Strikers will pretty much always win. Not just because of the multipliers, the fact that they go higher, you can get more from them. They are easier to get as well as to maintain, because you haven't got to pulse the enemy to actually even start building stacks. You just have to hit them. That fire rate is kind of the start point as well as the end point as to why Strikers will always outperform HeartBreaker. However, the one thing that both of these builds don't actually show or talk about, because everyone just likes the DPS. The one thing they don't show or talk about is the utility of the build. For one, having someone run HeartBreaker in your group is going to be pulsing a lot of enemies. Flatline is a very, very powerful talent. The only thing that goes against Flatline is it's not passive. An enemy has to be pulsed in order for Flatline to work. Once an enemy is pulsed, that is a straight 15% at base, or if you're running the perfect, 20% multiplicative increase in your total damage. In terms of DPS, this is largely dependent on your crit ratios, how many crits you'll get per magazine. If every bullet crits, then that's a flat 20% increase in DPS. If no bullets crit, then it works out to about an 8% increase in DPS. So it's somewhere, depending on your crits, between 8 and 20% increase in DPS. However, if you put it through a calculator, you'll end up with about 16.3% increase in DPS. Then you have the armor. Well, the biggest complaints you get among the more casual groups is DPS doesn't count for anything if you're dead. Although this is true, you don't need to worry about armor if the enemy's dead, so it's kind of like a counter argument. However, HeartBreaker solves both these issues and both sides of the argument by one, having a very, very respectable DPS. Just to show, what is on screen now is the maximum Strikers DPS and the maximum HeartBreaker's DPS. Both of them are put up against the standard high-end DPS build with a FAMAS. Coyotes with the short buff, we've got Killer, Active, Contractors, Foxes, 3-piece Providence, we're using the Gift, Sacrifice. Strikers will do 81.66% more than high end, and HeartBreaker will do 48% more than high end. So although there is a large difference between both Strikers and Heartbreaker, they both utterly, completely outperform high end in terms of DPS. If you are wondering what the difference is when using something like Pristine Example, as it is the most powerful chess piece in the game, Strikers drops down to 52%, Heartbreaker drops down to 24%. However, these are their maximum outputs. So this gap is not going to be as large depending on your build. All that really comes from this and all my ramblings is that in terms of DPS, Strikers is the best. Then Heartbreaker, then you're probably looking more towards just your standard high-end DPS build. However, it's not all about DPS, as a lot of people like pointing out to me, despite the fact that I do have the stance of dead things don't shoot back. A lot of people I know will want a little bit of survivability in their builds, and with this, Heartbreaker does offer this. As you can see, from me shooting things, I'm gaining armor. Now, there are weird and wacky ways in which you're able to have your Heartbreaker build do some pretty decent DPS still and be really, really tanky. However, there is one caveat to this which no one seems to get. I actually recently had a comment about this as well. Once you hit max stacks with Heartbreaker and you hit your maximum armor, if you then take damage and lose that bonus armor, if you're still at max stacks, shooting things will not regain that armor. So you're not really, in a weird way, increasing your survivability, because you've got no way in which you're able to regen that armor without just stopping completely, which is kind of annoying. Like, in order to actually maintain your armor bonuses, you have to stop shooting. Now, although the armor bonus is a hell of a utility and will allow you to stay alive, once you hit max stacks, in order to regain and maintain this, you need to stop shooting to lose all of your stacks and then reshoot to regain your stacks. So you're in this constant weird cycle of loss and gain, loss and gain. Strikers doesn't have this, along with the fact that it's more versatile in specializations. Although you're able to pick and choose the specialization you want with Heartbreaker, you typically will want to go with Technician just for the laser pointer, which alleviates the stress and the need to hit those headshots just to get a pulse target. Utilizing Technician, putting the laser pointer on, completely cancels this out. So you are, in a weird way, depending on how you want to play, but 9 times out of 10 you're tied to using Technician. With Strikers, we're able to utilize Gunner or Firewall. Firewall gives you 30% health on kill. Not the greatest, but it's a way in which we're able to maintain our survivability. We can go Gunner as well, which gives us 10% armor on kill. Then adding in the fact that Strikers does that much more DPS, we're able to forego completely a weapon talent, which allows us to put something like Preservation on. Having Preservation and just having 10% armor on kill, or Gunner as well, which is 20% armor on kill, in terms of utility completely outperforms the increase in armor gain from Heartbreaker. Because once you've gained your max stacks with Heartbreaker, you can't regen that armor. You have to lose stacks. Strikers doesn't have this issue. Once you're at max stacks, just keep killing, keep regenning your armor, you'll be fine. Now, this is wholly dependent on how you wish to play. Where I play very aggressively, Strikers with Preservation is, for me, going to completely outperform Heartbreaker in terms of DPS as well as utility, because I'm not going to be taking that break. I'm not going to be slowing down that much. Whereas with Heartbreaker, once I'm at match stacks, if I lose that armor, I've lost it for good, pretty much. I then struggle to regain that armor in the first place, and I'm not going to be able to push through in terms of survivability, because I have no way to actually regen my armor in the first place, let alone the bonus armor. For the bonus armor, I have to lose stacks. Typically, with the way in which I play my Heartbreaker set, which is one of the reasons I have mine set up the way it is, I don't actually have to rely on the stacks in the first place, and all of the stacks are doing is just maintaining me until the end of the fight. I do more than enough damage without stacks, which is the reason I go with the build that I utilise. However, this is just my playstyle. I do know a lot of people will go full out blue armor cores, go for their ACS 12 and just gain maximum stacks, swap to their AR while they're at max stacks and just hope that their armor carries them through. A huge hint to this is if you look up some of the serious endgame legendary grind videos and how to clear legendary missions, you will typically see Hunter's Fury because of the armor on kill and the disorient, Strikers because of the maximum amounts of DPS, and Negotiators because of the, again, maximum amount of DPS. These are the typically 3 top tier gear sets that are able to clear legendary the quickest and easiest and most recommended for new players. This isn't to say that HeartBreaker can't clear legendary. It can, I've done it myself. However, from personal experience, and I know a lot of other people who would argue that Strikers and Negotiators are going to be your best bet for your first solo clear. HeartBreaker, although capable, isn't going to do it as comfortably because it has no way in order for you to maintain your maximum output 100% of the time, whereas Strikers and Negotiators do, as does Hunter's Fury. HeartBreaker is a very good set, and while you're at max stacks, the damage is absolutely phenomenal. But it's the armor, which a lot of people put way too much stock in. However, on the flip side to this, at least the set does actually come with some form of utility, whereas Strikers, the only utility it has is kill it faster. And if you can't kill it faster, which is why I typically scoff at blue and yellow Strikers builds, if you can't kill it faster, you completely lose all of its utility. It's kind of in the wording, armor on kill. You have to kill something. So in order to utilize and maximize this, you want to go as high a DPS as possible. This is the weird caveat to Strikers and the main difference between them. The utility of HeartBreaker is while you're in the fight. You're able to gain armor while you're in the fight. Whether how useful this is to you or may not be to you is entirely dependent on your playstyle. For the way in which it works for me, it's not really that useful. I would actually prefer armor on kill, or maybe each stack gave me 0.1% armor regen. This would be a better scenario. That means at maximum stacks, that's 10% armor regen. Whereas Strikers, initially on the set, there is no utility whatsoever. You would have to put something into your build in order to actually gain that utility in the first place, such as armor on kill, running gunner, putting preservation on your weapon. There are a few other things you can do, armor on kill mods, death grips, the 511 things. Why you would do this, I don't know. But typically, the reason you would do this and the reason you can get away with doing this is the DPS of Strikers is so high that you're able to forego a maximum damage piece to put like a utility piece or a component or talent or something in your build, because it's not going to compromise Strikers that much. Now, as I said at the start of the video, they both have their pros and their cons. A pro for Strikers is going to be just the pure and utter DPS. A con would be, although you can get some serious utility out of it, it all depends on your kill rate. It's typically going to be from armor on kill, although this can also be seen as a pro. The con side to it is it doesn't come on the set natively. It's going to have to be something that you yourself consciously put into your build. A way in which you effectively kind of have to nerf yourself slightly to actually put something into it, which isn't too much of a drawback, simply just because of how much damage it does. With HeartBreaker, you get a lot of DPS, not as much as Strikers, but you still get a lot, and it does come with the inbuilt utility of gaining bonus armor. However, there is no way in which you're able to regain that bonus armor without you stopping your DPS, which is its biggest drawback. Anyway, that just about does it for this video. I do hope it's been helpful. Have fun, good luck, and don't die. It's bad for the health.